The governor was right about one thing, and that's that we all need to work together to fix the problems in Flint. Beyond that, we heard a lot of ducking, a lot of deflecting, a lot of trying to blame others in the administration, and a complete refusal by the governor to take personal responsibility for what occurred here. He provided no explanation for why, according to his own timeline, he waited over 3 months to declare an emergency. Why, according to even his own timeline, he waited over 3 months from when he first learned about this to deploy the National Guard to distribute water. Efforts that he acknowledged in his speech are still inadequate. And he provided lip service to accountability and holding the people responsible accountable. And yet the emergency manager who was in Flint, who was directly responsible for this, is still, to this day, to this moment, the emergency manager in the Detroit public school system. Certainly brings into question the governor's commitment to holding people accountable. It also brings into question the governor's commitment to improve the Detroit public school system when he's put there the person who was directly responsible for poisoning children in Flint. But I want to emphasize that the real crux of this issue, and if we want to avoid repeating these kinds of catastrophes in the future, as the governor claims that he wants to, we've got to increase government accountability and transparency. And that's why we as Democrats have called for years, and especially in recent months, to expand the Freedom of Information Act to apply to the governor and the executive branch as well as to legislators. Because only when we let sunshine shine on government do we make sure that government works for everyday people in this state instead of special interests. The governor also paid a lot of lip service to making sure that the economy works for everybody. He paid lip service to education. And yet, this governor and this Republican legislature have consistently underfunded education at all levels. And that may be most true of higher education, where the funding of higher education today is still far below where it was when the governor took office. And the most important way we can make sure that we're expanding economic opportunities and having an economy that works for everybody is investing in education and making sure that higher education is affordable and accessible to everybody who wants to improve their future and get ahead in life. And yet, we see that tuition is still far too expensive for most Michiganders. And so I would just summarize the governor's speech by saying he paid a lot of lip service to a lot of ideas, but his lip service certainly is not in accord with his actions recently or at any time during his governance.
Thanks very much, Tim. And I think I can speak for my colleagues here, both in the House and in the Senate, that we have been offering solutions for months and longer to this issue and to so many more issues. I think the most important thing that we can take from this speech and from this issue is there are 4 key points that have got us into this issue: a lack of urgency, a lack of honesty, a lack of accountability, and a lack of oversight. And I want to put this 100% unequivocal because it's been raised again in this speech. In March of 2013, the emergency manager sent a resolution to the city council to buy 18 million gallons of water from KWA. That is exactly that is the only thing that he asked for. The city council amended it to 16 million gallons, sent it back to him, and he said, I don't care what the city council says, I'm buying 18 million gallons anyway. That's the only action the city council ever took regarding to Flint River water. When the water was switched, the Department of Environmental Quality, mandated by federal law, failed the citizens of my community. They failed to make sure that they had corrosion control and to protect the citizens of my community. And I can tell you this right now, we're not going to stand here and allow people to stand up and lie to my community. That's exactly what happened. To rewrite history, we need to be about solutions. We need to be about making sure those babies that have been ingesting lead in their water for over 2 years have the urgency to make sure that the nutrition, the health care, the early on services, the services that can protect their brain development, can protect their cognition, that they have those services now. Not 6 months from now, not not 3 months from now, not 8 years from now. We need it now. Citizens in my community have been suffering for 2 years. And the governor acknowledged in his own speech that was 6 months ago as members of administration brought this issue to him. Myself and members of the community here, citizens, water warriors, Brenda, Melissa, others, have been bringing this to the folks at the emergency manager, the very emergency manager who ignored the citizens' pleas, who is now ignoring the pleas of teachers and parents in Detroit, allowing 60 kids, 50 kids in a classroom, allowing ceilings to collapse, allowing rats and mold to be in classrooms. Yes. That's what we need to be focused on. Yes. That's the solutions we need to fix, not fixing the reputations of individuals in this body and also in the governor's mansion. This needs to be about solutions for people. And I think that's what we need to be focused on. And that's what I'm going to be proposing, as I have been for the last 5 months. And we'll take any questions. And I'm going to calm down a little bit because I'm obviously pretty mad for drinking that water myself for 2 years. I want to see a long-term plan, whether it's making sure that that every child that's been exposed, because it's a population-wide problem, that they get the services, whether it's for 1 month or for 10 years, whatever they need. And I want to see what that I want to see a plan to have that done. Nutrition needs to happen yesterday. Schools will be out in June. We can't hope that these kids are going to get the nutrition that they need over the summer unless we have it in place now. We need to make sure that early on services, Head Start, Great Start, every single program that we know scientifically works to help get the help these kids need. And we need to have a study done immediately to find out if it's service lines or the entire infrastructure has been ruined. I mean, this is something that's been going on for a long time, and we cannot keep waiting for this.
Yeah, I would just add to that there are really three distinct issues here that are interrelated. One is the immediate need for clean, drinkable water in the city of Flint. And this initial appropriation number that the governor mentioned is really only about that piece. And even then, it may not be adequate. But the longer-term issues, in terms of fixing the pipe infrastructure in the city of Flint, in terms of making sure that we're addressing the needs of children who have suffered lead poisoning, and who are going to suffer learning disabilities, and we're providing special education services to them and wraparound services to them. The governor has provided no detail whatsoever about those things, despite the fact that he has known about this crisis for almost 4 months, and yet here we are at the state of the state, and we're not hearing details from him. We need details. We need specific plan of action. We need to have a price tag associated with that, and we need to work together to get solutions implemented now for the city of Flint and its residents. Well, the governor tonight said that he was going to release all of his emails over the past 2 years. Now, without the Freedom of Information Act applying to his office, there's no way to ensure he does that or to enforce his doing that. It's a little unclear, too, whether he's promising just to release his personal emails relating to Flint or whether he's committing to release all of his administration's emails relating to Flint. I would call on the governor to make sure that he's releasing all emails and all documents from his administration that relate in any way to this Flint water crisis.
This is an issue that's been brought forward. There's been a lot more attention recently. And now it's an issue that people across the country know about. But people in my community have been dealing with discolored water, water that had a bad taste to it, a bad odor to it, that was causing all sorts of health problems for a long time. And myself, Representative Neely, Representative Phelps, and others, our colleagues on this side of the aisle, have been asking for this kind of oversight for a long time. It's our responsibility. We're an equal branch of government. Our job's not to just, allow for whatever they want to have happen. Our job is to hold people accountable to make sure that every resident and every taxpayer of the state is safe. And because there's been a lack of oversight, 100,000 members of my community, 9,000 children, and many, many others, just in Flint alone, are now having to deal with the failings of state government.
Well, and the final thing I'd like to say is that we have seen a number of pundits and talking heads and Republican politicians make offensive statements like the Flint water situation is a hoax or that it's not that big of a deal, that it's being overstated. And I would ask those people, how many children need to be poisoned by lead and suffer brain damage in order for you to think this is a big deal? I would ask those politicians on the Republican side who don't think this is important, I would ask them how many people need to die from Legionnaire's disease before you think this is a big deal. I would ask them, would you be having the same attitude if this crisis were in your community instead of in the city of Flint? They should be ashamed of themselves. This is a big deal. It is a human catastrophe, and we have a collective responsibility to acknowledge it as such and to act promptly to address the problems.
We visited over the weekend citizens of Flint who've still been asked to pay water bill. They should get a refund for the water bills they paid since they first began to smell the water and see the darkening of the water. They should get a refund, not pay more. Second, the governor tonight engaged in contrition or absolution, which is personal. It does not mitigate the crime that has been committed. The Department of Justice still has this role to play. Why was the water shifted from the Detroit water supply, which was for 50 years has been producing water? Now, even as we bring in water, we still must go through poison pipes. I saw a child today about 11 years old who was nearly bald, all the hair at the back of his head already. The great fear is mothers who will be having babies who may be deformed. This is a crime against humanity. It must be addressed as such. To be sure, the distinction between emergency and disaster must be addressed, because emergency is a category that diminishes the significance and the impact. This is an emergency that's a disaster zone. This must be seen as a disaster zone. Someone said, well, it's a man-made, and Katrina was a national disaster. Fact is, Katrina was man-made as well, because they didn't invest in the levees. Yeah. So there's no real distinction between what happened in Katrina, where they didn't invest in levees, and here where they rerouted the use of water, trying to cut corners. But this is a pattern. You strip the democracy of the voters with emergency managers. All this happened on emergency managers. Yes. You strip workers of the collective bargaining to weaken unions. Then you strip the environmental security with polluted air and brown fields and contaminated water. We hope that when the president comes to town tomorrow, that we'll address the whole issue of a policy on violence and urban reconstruction and rural reconstruction. We are now speaking of spending more money on the military than 8 other nations, 2 through 9. It's time to reinvest in our infrastructure and put America back to work. Just the idea of building those pipe lines from Flint to the Detroit water supply, put thousands of people back to work. So let's turn a minus into a plus. The best news of a bad situation is that people of all stripes have come together, because it transcends normal politics. The city is 55% African American, 35% white, 6% Latino, but all human. Everybody matters. We must all join, close ranks, and this is going to cost more to revive this system than it would have been to sustain it. But now we must pay that price, because the price we don't pay will be the price of death. This is terror, and we all deserve better. Thank you very much.